Welcome to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. I'm your host, Wendy V, and in season 3, we're redefining success for social entrepreneurs looking to grow their revenue. If you have reality-changing ideas, this is the place for you. Let's jump right into today's episode. Here's a fundamental impact question for you. How do you find, keep, and make sure that you're going to retain the talent that is the most valuable resource for your organization? I'm Wendy V, and today we're going to jump right into that conversation with nonprofit HR and the founder, Lisa Brown Alexander. I'm excited to invite you to answer this first question of who are you and how do you make an impact?
Well, thanks for the question, and thanks for inviting me to be with you today, Wendy. Who am I? I am Lisa. I'm a founder, but I'm a mom and a wife and a daughter. I'm also an immigrant to the United States and came here now 36 years ago. So I'm multifaceted. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a risk taker, an agitator, a thought provoker. That's me. That's who I am.
A holistic being. I love it.
I try to be.
Oh, that's great. So where did you come here from? What is that?
I came here from Montreal. I was born in Montreal, Canada, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and came here via Toronto. So I was born there. We moved to Toronto when I was a youngster, and I came here to the United States to attend Howard University, and have been here ever since.
Yes, here in the DC area. Cool. I love it. And that's a great story because Canada's really cold. So maybe you got a little bit warmer in that journey, hopefully.
A lot warmer, yeah. I don't know how I survived the winters of Montreal. It's really cold there, but it's also beautiful when it's not really cold. So
yeah, you can think back about it fondly now that they're a part in your history. That's great. And so this is, your company that I mentioned, nonprofit HR, and you mentioned you're an entrepreneur, but that might not have been exactly where you started your path. So I'm curious, how did you get to even where you decided you were going to start a business? What is the early story of your journey?
Yeah, so I began my career in human resources in, I guess that was 1989, late 89, somewhere around there, and started out working for a multinational consulting firm in their international benefits division. I was able to leverage my knowledge of Canada and the international space. And so eventually moved from there to a nonprofit. And that was my foray into the nonprofit world. 3 organizations later, I'm giving you the short version. 3 organizations later, I wanted to parlay all of my experience into creating a set of solutions for organizations that prior to that point wasn't available, which was human resources, thought partnership, and advisory services in a nonprofit informed way. And there was no one doing that. And so I gathered my marbles, left my good VP job at a trade association, and started nonprofit HR in response to what I saw as an unmet need.
If you're looking for grant funding and don't know where to start, let me introduce you to the secret that even grant writers don't know. Idea to Impact, the grant writing course that makes it easy to learn everything from A to Z about grant writing in plain English with on-demand half-hour modules and go at your own pace workbooks. This course is unlike any other because it delivers insider tips from a grant reviewer and grant creator, me. I've awarded over $35 million in grants throughout my career, and I give you access to all of the resources and knowledge that you need to apply for millions of dollars on your own, no grant writer needed. Sign up today at wendyvelos.com/grants. And that's a really great way to think about it, that there was something that you saw a hole or a gap and you just sort of went for it. As any true entrepreneur is like, opportunity, let me go jump in there. That's great. So you were the only person in that space then.
We were.
Did people think you were sort of a little insane in the beginning of like, why is this lady doing this?
Absolutely. I left a very secure job. Some of my colleagues are still there 25 years later almost. And so yeah, it was a big risk and one that I wasn't sure was going to pan out, but it has. And we're now a national consulting firm working with organizations across the full spectrum of social impact. So we work with traditional charitable organizations, we work with associations, foundations, and social enterprises to help them maximize and optimize their talent capacity. And that means making sure that they have the systems, the people, and the culture needed to advance their mission.
Yeah. And I think people and human talent, or the individuals who make the whole thing go around, are such an important part of sustainability for an organization. But yeah, it's often an undervalued field in terms of how much you pay people. Typically, salaries are a little lower than private industry.
They
And
can be,
so,
but not always.
not always, right? But the perception is that you are like a starving artist in the nonprofit arena, you know. And so how can we make sure that we're providing, the right sort of supports for nonprofit workers to keep them at the organizations, keep them doing good work?
I think one of the best ways to do it is to do it on purpose. Much like we tackle our missions and the impact we're trying to have in communities on purpose, we're pretty intentional about that. We're intentional about fundraising. We're intentional about making sure that we have the resource allocation needed to carry out the work. But how do you do all of that without the people? And so the same level of intention you use to create and advance a mission is the same level of intention needed for the people side of things. And it's a missing part of a four-legged stool in many organizations, but when done right, can be a game changer.
Yeah, and it's great because those are the things that you lose. Every time you lose someone, you lose the historical knowledge, the processes that were put in place, or, there's a lot of disruption that happens into that cycle. So it's always interesting to me to see, what are the strategies we can use to make sure that people can continually, over and over again, can not only make an impact, but can get better at doing it. And I think the better part is a lot of it is the human capital.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I know I asked you, as we started going in this conversation, you saw the hole, you decided to jump in. People thought, okay, what is this lady doing? This is a little bit interesting.
You're crazy.
And you started with purpose, right? Well, you definitely jumped in with purpose on this one. And then you just somehow scaled a very substantial consulting firm as a woman. And as you said, the whole other things you have going on in your life, your family, and other things going on. Can you give us a little bit of insight into you as the founder, what that process was? Like, how did you get through that, or any challenges you might have faced that had caused you to sort of redefine success for yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we face the same challenges I think a lot of small businesses face, right? Having enough people to do the work, having the financial resources. We had no funding. We didn't have a backer. That wasn't happening for small businesses in 2000 at the level that they are now anyway. And so this was a self-funded venture. For 3 years of the first 3 years of the business, I was still working and maintained my full-time job and poured every dime that I made into more capacity for the business. And then at year 3, I left my corner office in a rubber tree plant and moved into the business full time. And so we've grown it organically for the first 10 years of nonprofit HR's life. We practiced the principles of managed growth, which mean that we kept a close hand and eye on the work. I did much of the work myself in partnership with what was then our growing staff. And we made it a priority to do things really well. That was really, really important. And by doing so, we were able to kind of grow the business organically. Starting in around 2018, we started to scale at a much faster pace. And then in 2020, we saw explosive growth in response to both COVID and the murder of George Floyd, both of which triggered employers to look at their staff in very new and unprecedented ways. And they came to us for guidance and assistance and direction.
Yeah, both of those events are very pivotal in, I think, a lot of industries, but definitely in the impact industry, those moments were and happening right back to back, sort of bookending a couple of years.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you don't ever know when you get one of these ideas and you start going down this path of implementing it. You never know what conditions are going to happen around you. Those are those external factors that I think a lot of us in the impact world understand. Like, yeah, we have a best laid plan, and then COVID happened.
And then life happened.
Yes.
That's right.
So how did you get through that as a founder? You said you grew rapidly in that time frame. Like, how did you manage that?
Yeah, we were drinking from a fire hose between 2020 and 2023, the beginning of 23. We managed by anchoring ourselves in our values and our principles as a firm and making sure that we stayed true to the culture that we had built in the preceding 20 years, right? So we were very intentional about people and culture before people and culture were kind of hip and cool. And that allowed us to be grounded. We were very much dialed into the needs of our staff. And created all kinds of ways to remain connected when we were forced apart physically. And that served us well. I think we continued to make values-based decisions. We centered our employees and the needs that they had as individuals and people, also living with through and with the pandemic. And all of our kind of the social turmoil that came from the murder of George Floyd and the impact that it was having on our staff of color. So all of those things were taken into consideration. And because we're good at people stuff, we practiced what we preached, and that saved us. We also have an incredibly resilient staff. And for some people, the changes that we made and the speed of change was too much, and they transitioned out and away. But the folks we have today are the best and the brightest and the strongest and most resilient. And that's allowed us to grow and scale and continue to be responsive to the needs of the sector.
I love that because I've met some of your staff before I met you, and I know that they are fantastic people. And I also was curious because from what I understand is you guys not only have a staff that's sort of decentralized and operates virtually in different places, but you also have clients around the country as well. You don't operate just in one region, right?
That's right. We do have clients across the country. And we have clients across the full ecosystem of the sector. So our clients include human service organizations, arts and cultural institutions, all kinds of organizations that, human services, youth serving organizations, trade associations, environmental and human rights organizations. It really covers the full spectrum of the sector. And our staff are in probably 25 states across the country. So we're all over the place physically and cover everything from soup to nuts.
Which is great because if there's other impact organizations in those markets, and having somebody who knows that community and is there with you is really powerful. I'm curious, because I'm sure this is an intentional piece of your model. When you say you were open to serving all the impact organizations across the spectrum and the sector, what was that decision like? Because I think for me, when I started this business, I kept getting pushed to niche down, focus and, focus on youth or focus on one place. And I said, but they all need help.
Yeah, and that's how we looked at it too. They all needed help. They all needed the benefit of the knowledge that we brought to the table, regardless of their mission. I think in 24 years, we're in our 24th year, we probably turned away maybe 3 or 4 mission organizations based on just not having a philosophical alignment with what they were advocating for. But apart from that, if you're social impact or mission focused, you are a qualified candidate and are willing to pay for the expertise and the knowledge we bring to the table.
Yeah, and I love the clarification too that it includes social enterprises or social businesses, because that, really that's where people tend to, we say on this podcast, we're blurring the lines between the business, nonprofit, and impact sectors. But it's often that business practices and nonprofit management practices are very similar, and what makes them successful or drives the revenue in the door are practices that can learn from both sectors. So I actually like to have people in the same conversation.
Yeah. And we are a social enterprise ourselves. So we get it.
Yeah, I love that you're like a scaled social enterprise example that I think is going to be great for this audience to learn from. This is why, but let's dig into all the things behind it, because this is such a great case study. So I'm curious for you, you've been at this for a very long time. Obviously, you haven't burnt out yet. So you must have some pretty good tricks up your sleeve.
Season.
Yeah. So I'm sure you know what burnout feels like though. So how do you maintain yourself to continue to show up and serve? And what is your wellness like? Give us a little peek into that.
So I also happen to have another business that is kind of anchored in the wellness space, which is forced me to be more intentional. So my husband and I own a luxury bed and breakfast destination that is, we call it wellness infused. So we have a art gallery and a spa. We're on 7 acres of greenery. We have a pool. So we're all about all things relaxation at Wellspring Manor and Spa, which is my other business. I try to emulate practices, well-being practices, one by taking a retreat, a solo retreat every year. I happen to be an introvert, and so I am best fed by having time alone and being able to kind of sit in silence and ideate about either my next or a problem that I might be facing, or just imagining, which is a lost art, right? And so I do that every year. That's part of my ritual. I happen to also be very much into spas. And so I do not take a vacation without visiting one. One, because I'm doing Intel, but two, also because I think that's what feeds my self-care, just slowing down and allowing myself to be cared for. And for the first time in 24 years, I will be taking a sabbatical from my business. So that's hot off the press.
What? This is awesome. The scoop is here.
I will be taking a 3-month sabbatical in an effort to reset and prepare for our 25th year of service. And so we'll be spending some time really reimagining and thinking through our next and what that looks like. So I'm excited about that and being able to both rest and reimagine.
Oh, that's such a great example for other founders. Oh my gosh, look at you leading by example by resting. That's a great story for everybody. Hey, take a piece out of this book with Lisa.
So, it takes preparation though, Wendy. It does take, and so people say, oh, I'm going to take a sabbatical, but it takes work. You've got to set some plans in place, have some good succession, some duplicity within your team so that folks can stand in for you in your absence and really allow you to disconnect and unplug. And I have that. I'm very blessed to have a dynamic leadership team, and they will be stepping in for me and holding up the firm during my absence, and will continue to lead while I'm gone. And it's a real good thing. It's important.
Well, and I was going to say that's a great sustainability example as well, that you can step away and you have the processes in place, the people with the expertise, and folks who will continue to maintain the mission while you're gone. And as a social business, sometimes we don't get examples of what does sustainability look like for a social business? But that's a great one. I think that's perfect. So, besides taking a little bit of time and reimagining things, I think as an entrepreneur, innovation is an important part of the process. And you were saying, you're going to step away and do some of that. But I assume when you come back, the team understands there's going to be some innovation coming their way.
They're a little nervous, they know what.
How do you manage change for folks? They know it's coming.
You know what? We tell them it's coming, and it's ever present. And if change kind of wigs you out, we may not be the right spot for you. I think organizations do themselves a disservice by being stagnant and not responding to changing kind of external demographic changes and just kind of societal changes. Who would have imagined that COVID would have come? Who would have imagined the upheaval of that followed the murder of George Floyd? And now what we're seeing with people who are taking stances in support of the people of Gaza. Right? That's another kind of major world change that is having impact even here in the United States, even though we're thousands of miles away. And so it's that recognition that the world, life is lifing, and that our organizations have to be able to respond to life lifing, that I think has been a recipe for success. And like I said, if change wigs you out, then nonprofit HR is probably not the best place for you, because we're going to keep changing, we're going to keep evolving. Change is like the air in the walls. It's part of what happens, and we have to respond to it in a way that allows us to maintain our mission, but recognize that circumstances, both within and outside of the organization, may change.
Yeah, we talk a lot about growth mindset in this podcast, and that is a brilliant way to maintain your growth mindset is to recognize that change is inevitable and that you're going to have to continue to grow with life as life is lifing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you'll have to figure it out. So I think there are a couple of questions I really want to, because you are such a wealth of knowledge, I want to make sure we get these ones in. And these are ones, again, sometimes I don't even get to these with people. So I love this. You probably have some advice for an earlier version of yourself in there. I'm wondering if you could go back and remember an earlier part of your journey where you thought, this is something I could have given myself this piece of advice. And if I could give it to somebody else, I want to offer it on this podcast. What would that be?
I think our adoption of managed growth principles is really powerful. So sometimes when we start a business, we've got the end in mind. I'm kind of glad I didn't have the end in mind. But it was more important to be present and to do whatever we were assigned to do or what the work that we were awarded really, really well without a disproportionate focus on profit. That focus allowed us to focus on excellence, which gave birth to new business. I think what happens with a lot of new businesses, they're focused on the profit over the execution of the work. And then it doesn't always pan out because they're just focused on the dollar. Good work makes space for good work. Good work begets good work. And so my advice to myself would probably be, don't do it differently. Keep focusing on the quality of what we do over the dollars, and the dollars will come. And that's exactly what has happened.
Oh, that's really helpful, I think, as a newer business too, because you spend a lot of time focusing on the quality, and people are like, yeah, but you spent more than a billable hour, on that thing. And it's so hard as a consultant to figure out, well, how much do I charge people for things? And, what is a project-based rate? So I love that example. And I also was curious with the way that nonprofits and businesses partner. This is something that I'm always, I grew up in the federal government, I say, because I worked there forever and always had money to kind of dangle in front of people and ask them to partner. But I think for a lot of nonprofits and a lot of businesses could be partnering better with nonprofits to support them, but also nonprofits could be inviting businesses better to support them. So how could we start really bringing these two together to get the resources that we need for the work that needs to get done?
I think that starts with the mindset of the board and the leadership of an organization. A lot of nonprofits operate from a scarcity mindset, right? And we'll be glad to get the crumbs from the table, right? As opposed to recognizing that within many nonprofit organizations reside the solution to major societal challenges and dilemmas. And when you come to the table with that strength and power, it's like you need to partner with us because we are doing this work. We're on the ground. We know it. We live it. We breathe it. And if you want to make an impact, you need to work with us. It's a mindset that I don't know that the majority of nonprofit leaders come to the table with, but it's a position of strength. And when we operate from our strengths, we always know that the results are better. But I think owning your expertise and the solutions you've already brought about for particular communities can be really powerful. And we know that the government doesn't do that work well. They fund it, but they don't do it. And the same applies to business, right? They don't do it either. They fund it. And so if they really believe in a thing, whatever the thing is, they can find that nonprofit that is working in that space. And the nonprofit has to own the power that they have. They bring the secret sauce and come to the table owning that secret sauce.
Yeah, and that's very powerful. I think a statement is that you have something that could change the world if you're able to do something well. Yeah. And that's usually what I generally tell my clients too. It's like you have the solutions inside of you or as a founder or within the talent in your organization, but they may not have unlocked themselves yet because maybe the opportunity isn't there. Maybe something was blocking you before. But once that is there, the opportunity is either there or you create the opportunity. It's your job to act. Like you have to still step through the door. and take the action and own your worth, right?
With confidence. With confidence.
Yeah, and live in the purpose that your organization is founded in, which I think is really important in those conversations with other partners. The other question I had for you, which kind of dovetails where you left off with the government piece, is well, if there was a policy change that you could put in place that you think, oh, this is a policy change that needs to happen, what would be something that you would focus on and kind of advocate for?
Wow, that's a big one. I would immediately change the federal minimum wage. A lot of social challenges are steeped in poverty, right? It affects education. It affects healthcare. And the notion that some states are still permitted to pay people at $7.25 or $8.15, whatever your state, minimum is, it to me is just abhorrent in 2024. Someone could work a full-time job, 2 or 3 of them, and still not earn a livable wage, and it would be legal for an employer to pay at that rate in today's. So at the federal level, I would definitely advocate for and support a federal minimum wage that mirrors the livable wage or the highest living wage in the most expensive state. Like, let's say California, right? The livable wage in California might be $25 an hour. I would love to see that mandated, like as a federal. Now, I know that's like way out of the realm of possibility, but think about what it would do, how it might begin to transform the lives of folks who are resource constrained to just have access to things that are essential to life, not like an extra pair of Jordans, right? But just quality food, quality healthcare, quality education for their families.
Yeah, and just housing in California, I think is
oh my gosh.
That is a basic human need in general.
Yeah.
I'm a California girl, so I could speak with authority on how that works.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, this is such a lovely conversation. I'm glad we got that last big question in, because again, like I said, some people don't even get to my more difficult questions. So
I'm glad we do.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, no, it's a great, and I think, we talk about like basic minimum wage payments or basic, living wage payments for people to just have the ability to live and to, even try to thrive, not necessarily have the keys to
Not
it.
to survive.
Yeah. It's so important. So I'm excited that you brought that up. So thank you for giving us all these insights. I wanted to ask you one last thing. If you could tell us where we can find not only you, but also information about nonprofit HR, if anyone is listening to this episode and they were interested in your services or are contacting you.
Absolutely. So nonprofit HR provides human resources and talent management support to social enterprises, foundations, associations, and nonprofits across the country. We can be found at nonprofithr.com, just the way it sounds, no hyphens, no spaces, nonprofithr.com. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. I think we might even have a TikTok channel. Don't quote me on that, but I think we're out there. And I'm, of course, can be found on LinkedIn at Lisa Brown Alexander.
And you have your own podcast, don't you?
We do. It's called The Switch. And we use that platform to interview sector leaders about their talent and culture practices and how those practices support the advancement of their mission.
Awesome. So people who like podcasts, if you're listening to this podcast, you can go check out The Switch as well and find Lisa and Nonprofit HR at nonprofithr.com. This has been another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. And we thank you, Lisa, for joining us in our collective and being here for this episode.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we look forward to having you come back. If you're curious about something we shared, make sure you check in the show notes below. And do you want the secret to make your nonprofit or business more sustainable and more profitable? Hop into my Learn, Grow, Thrive University, where I give you exclusive access to resources, mini courses, and templates for free. All you need to do is sign up at wendybelos.com/university. See you next episode.